Hi, welcome to this lesson on significant figures. Here we're going to take an introductory look at how to count the appropriate number of significant figures in these 8 examples. To start with, we're just going to look at whole numbers. So our first example here, 23, has a 2 and a 3. And anytime you have a whole number where all of the digits are non-zero numbers, then all of those digits matter in terms of your significant figures. So 23 has 2 significant figures. Both those numbers matter for telling us the value of the number. When you have zeros to the right of non-zero digits, like we see in 150, 150, we have a 0 to the right of the 1 and the 5, and any zeros to the right in a whole number do not count towards your number of significant figures. So here, the 1 tells us how many hundreds we have, the 5 tells us how many tens we have, and we don't have anything in the ones column. So for this particular number, we only have 2 digits that matter in terms of telling us the value of the number, or 2 significant digits. In 107, the 0 is a little bit tricky, because for this one we see that it's in the middle. If you have zeros to the right, and it's all zeros to the right, you don't count any of those zeros. But if you have a 0 in the middle and it's surrounded by other non-zero digits, then you do have to include that when calculating the number of significant figures. So here we have 107. The 1 tells us how many hundreds we have. The 0 tells us that we don't have anything in the tens column, but that's not the end of our number. The 7 tells us that we do have 7 in the ones column. So we in fact need all 3 of those digits to tell us what the number actually is. So all 3 of those in this example will be significant. Let's try that out on this last example and see if you can do it on your own. So how many significant figures do we have in 4,206? If you said 4, you're correct. The 4, 2, 0, and 6 all count because the 0 is in the middle. So we have 4 significant figures in that example. Now let's see if we can step up to slightly harder questions here where we're going to deal with decimals. Many of the same rules apply when looking at significant figures in numbers that have a decimal. So for example, here in this first example that we look at, 1.7, both of those numbers are non-zeros. And so we're going to count both of those towards the number of significant figures, and that will have 2 significant figures. Very similar to what we saw over here with 23. 2 non-zero digits tells us that we have 2 significant figures. 2.06. So this is going to work similarly to the examples we looked at here with 107 and with 4,206. 2.06 has a 0 in the middle, so that means we do include that. And in fact, we have 1, 2, 3 significant figures for that number. Now let's take a look at 0.0029. So we mentioned when dealing with whole numbers, like in the example of 150, that if you have zeros to the right, then that means that you're not going to count those. But in this example with 0.0029, when you have a decimal, you're not going to include zeros to the left. So for whole numbers, it's zeros to the right that we don't include. For decimals, it's zeros to the left that we're not going to include when counting the number of significant figures. So here, none of those are significant until we get to the 2. 2 and 9 gives us a total of 2 significant figures in that example. Now let's take a look at a decimal example where we have zeros to the right. So in your decimals, zeros to the left don't count, and in your decimals, if we look at 0 to the right, 8.30, in this case you have a whole number, you have a tenths, and it's showing you, in terms of how specific the number is, it's showing you a hundredths column. So in fact, with decimals, zeros to the right do count. So in this example here, 8.30, we actually have 1, 2, 3 significant figures, and that's one of the rules that makes significant figures a little bit tricky. So just make sure that we're aware of that. When we're counting significant figures and we're deciding what to do with the zeros, whole numbers, you don't count zeros that are to the right. Decimals, you don't count zeros that are to the left, but you do count zeros that are to the right in decimals, because those zeros tell you more specifically what number it is that you're looking at, and they are in fact significant for determining a value. If you have further questions, please watch our other videos, or you can visit our website at www.sandersontestprep.com. The link is in the description below. Thanks for watching.